Good evening and welcome. Is there a question, Christine? I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Oh, absolutely. You can always go out and hear the video and download the slides, as well as in the actual CIP, you can go to the Learn tab and follow the steps in the lab. So yeah, they're all available to you. You're welcome. And you'll see when I show where the labs are, again today, you'll see where you can grab the fundamentals. Welcome, Barack. Good evening, welcome, Kyla. Go ahead with your question, Kyla. Oh, it was just a hello. Okay, thank you. Welcome. Welcome, Mark. Burak, welcome again.
Hello.
We will begin our lecture at 2 minutes after the top of the hour. Welcome, Sriram, back. Good to have you again.
Hey, Adele, nice to be here.
Yes, sir. Good evening, welcome all those that just joined. We'll start 2 minutes after the top of the hour to allow others to join us. So again, you have time to get water, coffee, what have you. Welcome back, Herman.
Thank you. How you doing?
I'm good, and yourself?
I'm good, thanks.
Good evening, Kevin, welcome.
Hey, thanks a million. Looking forward to
Yes.
the session.
Yes,
How are you?
sir. I'm wonderful, wonderful, thank you. And yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad now. Nearly a long weekend, so can't complain.
All right. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we'll start at about 2 minutes after the hour to allow others to join us. Good evening, welcome, Greg. Welcome back. Good evening, Kyla and Kaylin. Welcome. For those that just joined, good evening and welcome again. Good afternoon to some of you. We'll start in about 2 minutes to allow others to join us, and we'll get this party started. Welcome, everyone. For those just joining us, we'll start in about 2 minutes. Thank you for joining us. We're glad to have you. Okay, all right, let's get started. Again, welcome everyone, and good evening and good afternoon to you. My name is Odell Gordon. I am a technical trainer here at Sumo Logic, and we're honored and happy to have you join us for this here Search Mastery certification session. I out of the Midwest. We got overcast and some storms coming through here in the US, in the Midwest here. So hopefully my connection stays strong. My background, again, I've been in IT for 30 years now. I've played several roles in IT, majoring around data specifically. I've dealt with DevOps at one part of my life and did a lot of database part of my life, and then ended up doing training where I've gotten my master's degree in education. I am joined by my esteemed colleague and manager, Josh Brothheim. Josh, you want to say hello?
Yeah, welcome to today's session. You're in very capable hands with Odell. To join him in a class previously. So welcome. I'll be in the chat. So any questions or things you want to chat about, just put them in there and we'll have a good class today. So back to you, Odell.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and get started, everyone. Josh is, again, as he said, going to man the chat and the questions. So have any problems, please let us know, okay? For those of you that did join me yesterday in fundamentals, we briefly explored a few of the operators. Well, today or tonight or this evening, our agenda is going to get some more hands-on, have some fun with those labs and those operators to kind of build our knowledge and our confidence around utilizing queries and building queries and things of that sort. So we'll get into searching and parsing and looking at field extraction rules. We'll look at some conditional formatting as well as some filtering in our operations. We'll plot our objects on a map. We'll format our results. We'll look at some moving averages. We'll identify some trends, look at an outlier, a set of outliers, and look at some comparisons. And then we'll create some alerts, okay? And then you'll have that opportunity, just like you've had in all of our other classes, to get certified, okay? Again, open book, open internet, open instructor. So we'll be here, and the goal is for you to actually certify. And you can do that, okay? You will do that, of course. Right now, of course, once you get certified, as I mentioned, we're happy you've taken our certification test and you've passed it. So we want you to fill out a form and retrieve that, receive that $15 Uber Eats voucher, okay? So, okay. All right, now, again, some of you may have taken our fundamentals class with others. Let me first go ahead and turn off my video to kind of save some bandwidth, get you to focus on the material and things of that sort, okay? You may have seen this slide several times before. It's the same slide. Again, at the top of the slide, we talk about 4 types of dashboards that you can create, okay? For example, I mentioned about my background, and of course I played DevOps role. I didn't have this CIP platform, but if I did, I could have came and logged in and looked at my operations, found out, are my systems up? Are there any health problems going on with any of my systems? I could have gleaned information from that. Security wise, I could have looked at a security dashboard, found out who's logging in, from where they're logging in, does anyone have access to the root user, etc. Could have gleaned information from that, okay? From a business perspective, we could have actually looked at our business intelligence and found out, hey, what are our customers looking at? What's in demand? We issued a new new campaign, and we wanted to see how is that campaign being affected. Okay, was it a marketing campaign? Was it successful? And then finally, from a global perspective, again, this is just a high level reminding you of what we covered before. We could have built a dashboard to actually look at our company and compare to other companies from a global perspective, looking at our data worldwide. So again, those are 4 examples of dashboards that you can create within our CIP platform, okay? You know, your data is going to be used, your logs and your metrics are going to be used so we can query and find out what happened and why it happened. Your actual logs and metrics come from several places, okay? Our tool is multi-tenancy. Security is very high priority. One of our core values is we're in it with our customers. And again, we mean security-wise, we're a cloud-based system. We want your data to be secure as well as our environment. Over to the right, you see some of our attestments. Again, SOC 2, FedRAMP, HIPAA certified. Again, we keep our attestments up to date and current. All right. And then finally, down at the bottom, your people. Again, what we mean by this is, again, we have a single point of information that we can share. Others can build upon it, and you can make decisions across all of those lines of business to kind of speed up those decisions. Collaboration, that's the key point about your people. So again, that's a 500-foot overview. We talked about this in the fundamentals course. It's the same slide. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask those questions. Something important here is the data flow. Again, this is a repeat slide as well. You know, if we think about a highway, and on one end of the highway is your logs and metrics. On the other end of the highway is the actual Sumo Logic cloud environment. We want to get your logs and metrics into our environment, so we're going to use collectors. And if you've taken the certification test and fundamentals, you know there's 2 types of collectors. There's the installed, and then there's the hosted. Again, the collectors are going to encrypt, compress, and send your information to the Sumo Logic environment. We're going to spend a lot of our time on the search and analyze, where we start using more of those operators. And we'll still display our results in charts and visualizations so we can monitor and set up some alerts in our dashboards. So again, we're going to spend our time on 2 and 3 today. But again, that workflow, that logical data flow, pardon me, is very detailed on what we're going to accomplish using the tool. Again, you know, we're going to use that source category metadata tag. You'll see 5 different types of tag, and the one that's in bold is the one that we use as a best practice and most often, okay? It's freely configured. So if I wanted to set my source category equal to Labs Apache Access, or maybe Labs Apache Era, or maybe prod or dev, those types of examples is how we can freely configure that source category metadata tag. Okay. All right, so again, that was just the 3 500-foot overview of stuff we've covered. Okay, now let's go ahead and have some fun and get our hands wet, okay, in the tool. Now we're going to invite you to use, again, our training environment, because we've populated the data in there. We know what's going on in that environment. We don't know what's going on in your production environment or your dev environment. So again, we're going to give you access to our training environment, okay? I would like for you to think of a 3-digit number from 1 to 999, pardon me. And I want you to put that number in the chat window. If you want, you can use the same number you used yesterday. That's fine, okay? I want you to watch me. For those of us that haven't been in the tool before, I want you to watch me and see how you're gonna log in. So again, you're gonna go ahead and type in service.sumologic.com. So you're going to open up a browser, type that in, okay? And once you type that in, whoops, I don't know how that got in there. Let me log out. Maybe I logged in too quickly. Again, I'll type in that service, sumologic.com. And I probably was logged in before, so let me sign out. And again, you're going to type in training, if I spell it correctly, plus the analyst, your 3-digit number at sumologic.com. And then the credentials, again, I put them in the chat for you. It'll be spring with an uppercase S, 22 exclamation mark. Let me display that in case I fat fingered it, and sign in. All right, you go ahead and give it a try. I'm sure you guys are familiar with how to do that. Thank you for putting your numbers in the chat. Now I'd like to confirm that everyone has logged in successfully. Thank you, David. If you could either put it in the chat or raise your hand to indicate you have logged in successfully. Awesome. Good. If you have any problems logging in, please let us know. Normally, it's probably the number. You probably want to choose another number, but make sure you're logging into our training environment. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Yvonne. Thank you, Gabrielle. All right. All right, very good. A lot of you are in. It's awesome. Thanks, Greg, for putting in your number. I'll put the credentials in. No worries. No need to apologize. I'll put them in there for you again. Good point, Greg. Remember, if you're seeing things from yesterday or the week before, or someone's used it, remember, you can just go up to that actual one of those tabs and just click on close all tabs. Okay. All right. Hopefully everyone is in our environment with no issues. Again, as I mentioned to Greg, if you're in there and you see a bunch of tabs, go ahead and close those tabs. Makes things easier for you. Make sure you're, use another number, Kyla. Try another number. Okay. Again, Herman, you as well. Try another number and make sure you're logging into our service.sumo Logic environment. Okay, try 647, Kyla. Try that number. Again, you're replacing the pound symbols with that number. Thanks, Lynn. Glad you're in. All right, anyone else having trouble logging in? Again, if it is, just go ahead and try to use another number. That usually will be what it is. Good, Kyla. Glad for you to get in. Herman, how about you? 582. Try that number, Herman. If nothing's working for you, try 582. All right. Looks like we're all in. Just a brief reminder of, ladies and gentlemen, our navigation panel. If you're not seeing it, again, there's the 3 stacks of cheese there. You can always expand it. In this class, I'm going to go ahead and just close mine until I need it. Glad you're in, Herman. Good, good. So again, I'm closing my navigation panel until it's time, because again, we're going to spend a lot of our time in the labs, log search, okay? Now, remember, ladies and gentlemen, yesterday, for those of you that have taken the fundamentals courses, you might have came into your home, clicked on your learn link, and down at the bottom, you saw fundamentals, and that's what we used. There's also the steps for the admin. We don't have the steps for our actual search mastery. So I'm going to demonstrate, ladies and gentlemen, how you would get there, okay? So I'm just going to go up and add another tab here and go ahead and type in help.sumologic.com. This is a great resource for you when it's time to actually David, yeah, I probably had a lot of cheese this afternoon, so that's why cheese came to my mind right away. But this is a great help for you, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to taking those exams. Okay. Anyhow, we're going to come out here and go to our help, sumologic.com, and we'll click on that first box there that start here. Okay. And when we click on that start here, we'll see over to the left the menus. Okay. So we'll see the quick start labs and tutorials. When we click on that, for those of you that wanted to take the fundamentals again, you could come here. Okay. We're going to use this search mastery. Okay. So I'm going to paste that in your chat for you, just in case you can't get there. Okay. So that's there for you. Now, some of you may want to know, well, Odell, can I download the slides and can I download the recordings, or can I get the recordings? Yeah, so I'm going to teach you how to get there as well. Okay. So I'll go back to my CIP. Okay. I'm going to go to the certification link under my home tab. I'll click on the Get Certified. That launches our Skill Jar app. And of course, you're going to go to the recorded live training. Once you click on that recorded live training, we are dealing with the search mastery. So we'll click on that. You'll register. That happens really quickly. It's just a click and you're registered. Here you can hear the video, the 2-hour presentation. My manager, Josh Brothheim, is actually doing that. So you can hear the same lecture that I'm having here. And of course, you can get the student guides. You can download that, as well as the slides. Again, you can do that for all of our curriculum by going to that recorded live trainings. Okay. So hopefully we're all in the same place now. We've gotten our labs. We know where to get the recordings. We know where everything is. Okay. All right. Now, one of the things that you can do that may help you if you're in a Windows environment, I tend to go ahead and click on one of my tabs, let's say the actual lab steps, and I right click and pin it. And again, I do that so I can easily toggle between my environment and the actual lab steps. Okay. And let me unpin this and wipe that out of there. Okay, so again, let's go ahead and get started, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I am on lab 1, a basic search of metadata and keywords. Let's click on that lab 1 together. All right, so we're going to learn the use of metadata and keywords. Why are we doing this, Odell? So we can narrow our search and improve performance. That's part of the goal of doing this, okay? So let's go ahead and grab our first query. Right click and copy it. Go back up top. Remember, you have the home, the library, the alerts, and let's go ahead and click on the new, and we're going to choose log search. As a reminder, when you create a new log search, it's going to default to the last 15 minutes. We'll talk about the time coming up. Notice as I actually click in the actual query area, I could actually build that same query just by clicking and
people
get involved with the query
there's some
language, for example,
background
how it works.
noise.
See,
that's because you have the video on in the area. When you clicked on the actual download of the slides in the lab, there's a video there.
demo.
You can turn the video off. Okay, I hope that helped you. All right, so again, as I mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, we can paste that here, but again, the tool is intelligent enough for us to do a type ahead if we wanted to. So if I type in labs/Apache case insensitive, I can go ahead and choose my labs Apache access. Or I could have done like you and pasted. I just wanted to show you some of the key features of the tool. Okay, we'll go ahead and run this query. You remember from your fundamentals course, you'll automatically get your histogram, you'll get the status, the elapsed time, as well as the results. Okay, you'll also remember that we're seeing one of 293 pages and we have 25 items per page. Okay, be aware you can always go to the gear symbol and change your display preferences. Again, this is sort of a repeat. You guys should be familiar with some of that. Okay. All right, let me just put the credentials in here again. We have some new people coming in. Make sure you log into our training environment. I'm putting the credentials in this chat. Again, you're going to think of a 3-digit number and log in. Okay. The actual lab guide is also in the chat. And I'll put that there for you as well for our latecomers. Okay, anyhow. So again, that was just a simple search. We search, we see our time and our message in our display browser. Over to the left, we see our time and our message. Okay, let's go ahead and build upon that. We can see the actual source that it's coming from, our lab Apache access. Okay. Now, if we wanted to narrow the scope, okay, and I'll go back to our lab steps, we want to identify our client errors, to narrow our search for only those with 404s, okay? So I can just go back to the actual query itself. Now, the and is implied. What does that mean? That means I don't necessarily have to add the and, okay? And I'm going to type in 404, okay? Now I'm going to run that query and you're going to notice that my messages now have 404 is highlighted. So these are all of my Apache Access messages that have 404s. Okay. This is something you should be sort of familiar with so far. Okay. Next, we're going to go ahead and go to our step number 3. Again, if you're following along, we're on lab 1, step number 3. We now want to use some Boolean logic to search for log line matches of error or check or check out. So again, here, we're going to just, you can copy the entire message or you can just copy the error or check, whichever you want to do, or you can type it, okay? I'm trying to save us from opening up a bunch of browser, a bunch of log searches, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just highlight the 404 here and paste in, okay? So I'm going to look for now error or notice I'm using a wildcard. Remember yesterday, for those of you that joined me, you can use wildcards within the tool. So we want errors or anything that begins, any phrase that begins with check, and that would be like check out, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and run that. So you can see we have 124 results, 1 of 5 pages, and our messages have the keyword checkout highlighted. Again, we used check asterisk as a wildcard. Okay. If it ever comes up on the test, then you know you can use wildcards. All right. Let's go back. Hopefully I'm not going too fast for you. Let me know if I'm moving too fast for you. Again, we got a lot of labs, so I want to try to sneak them all in that period of time. So in a new tab, we're going to go ahead and case insensitive, Deborah. Can we use a wildcard for error or check at the same time? Give it a try, Javier. Give it a try. Yes, you can use wildcards. Again, make sure that it's if you're using it with the error, you got to make sure you know your messages. Okay, so what you're looking for. Okay, so make sure the search makes sense with the wildcard. All right. All right, so next we're on in a new tab, we're going to search for messages that are in our era for the last 45 minutes. So in our Labs Apache era, we're going to search for 45 minutes. Now, remember, we have been going against our actual access. It may be data is being ingested, Kyla. So again, don't really get overwhelmed about the numbers. Again, just the functionality, hopefully. It may be just the numbers being ingested, you're getting more numbers, and you'll see when you run it again, the numbers may be different as well. Okay. All right, again, we're here on our number 4, and we're gonna highlight that source category equals Labs Apache era. So let's copy that. Let's go to our CIP. Let's add a new tab, a new log search, and let's paste our expression in here. Now we need to do this for the last 45 minutes. Now let's go over the time again for those of us that weren't here. Remember, when you click in the time, you have relative times. These are predefined relative times. If you haven't been in the environment before, you may not see a recent, but if you have, you'll see a recent. So recent times that you've used, okay? And also be aware you have custom times if you want to use a date and a time period. So you have that capability, all right? Also, one more thing, if you notice when I look at my relative time, I don't see a 45 minutes prior for last 45. I don't see that. I do have it in my recent, but again, if you ever wanted to type the value, the syntax is starting out with a minus symbol. Then typing in your numeric value and using either M for minutes, H for hours, or D for days. Okay, so again, we want to run this Labs Apache era in the last 45 minutes. Right, that's correct. Okay, so again, now we click on our blue run magnifying glass. And if you look at your messages now, you'll see I'll have my error messages. Okay, these are, I have over 5,000 results. I have one of 229 pages. In my field browser, I see my time and my messages. Okay, we'll talk about these hidden fields coming up. All right, and let's continue on to our next step. Let's go back to our labs.
Hey, Adele, I just have a question.
Go ahead.
So basically, I see so 235 messages, 235, but you saw I think 229. Am I doing something different, or are we so getting the messages from separate sources?
So again, no, we're getting from the same sources, ladies and gentlemen, but don't get overwhelmed with the numbers. My numbers may be different. Again, we're logging in. I'm running it maybe a minute or a second before you. Messages are being ingested, so no worries. The most important thing is the query and the syntax.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Sounds good. All right. All right, let's go back. Now, here we want to search on lab 1, step number 5 here. We want to search across both Labs Apache Access and Labs Apache era. So we're going to go ahead and highlight what's under number 5. Copy that. Go back to the CIP. I'll create a new log search and paste. Okay. And I'll bump it up to 45 so we can get some more time. I'm gonna go to recent and just click on 45. All right, now we are going against our errors and our access. If we look at these messages just to kind of get a feel for them, we can see here that I got some messages from my Labs Apache error, and I have some messages from my access down here at the bottom. Okay. Now, one of the advantages that we have is we have a field browser that has these field extractions. These fields were extracted, and I'll talk more about this later. But one of the things that we can do here, under my hidden fields, I can just click on source category, not the box, ladies and gentlemen, because that'll change your query. Just click on the actual phrase, and notice I can see that 80% of my actual messages are coming from access, okay? Whereas 19% is coming from my errors. Again, that's a nice feature for me when I'm looking at over 11,000 pages, over 29,000 results. I can see the percentages of these messages just by clicking on the actual column under hidden fields. Okay, we're going to talk more about that, but again, that's just a teaser to get you kind of excited about the possibilities here. All right, let's go back. And now let's go to step 6. We want to search across both Labs Apache Access and Labs Apache Era using a wildcard. Okay, so let's highlight that and copy, or you can just go back and, like me, you can highlight everything from Era all the way over and replace that with an asterisk. Okay, and what this is actually going to do for us is anything under the Apache folder, it's going to bring back all of those messages. So it's similar to what we did before, but we had an or in the other expression. Here we're saying, hey, bring it back, bring back everything. Okay, and again, you can see some access in here, and you'll also see some errors. Be mindful that you have your field browser. You can always click on the source category and see those percentages again. Okay. David, copy the expression. Maybe you fat fingered it for something. Copy it, don't type it. It looks okay, but no, I tested another one. What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
David, what you're doing is you're combining the source category and the access or error, and that's not the correct formatting for that. The or will work as a keyword, but not within the source category itself.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yep, gotcha. Yep, good point. All right. Hopefully that got you all squared away there, David. That's good. Good try. Good job. Keep it coming. All right. So again, we actually did Labs Apache asterisk, and we got the wildcard, so it's querying across anything under the Apache directory. Okay. All right. Let's go back. All right. Now we're going to issue a live tail. Okay, which searches our Lab Apache Access for messages that contain 404s. Okay, so we're going to highlight this expression and copy it. And go back to our CIP. And this time when we click on the new, we're going to go down and choose a new live tail. Okay, and we can go ahead and paste that. Now, Odell, why would I use a live tail? Well, typically an administrator does this. and we have a governor set. There's only 10 concurrent live tails can be ran at one time. So again, be aware of that. These are messages that are, a live tail is messages that are being ingested into Sumo Logic, okay? So when we click on the run, okay, and see, here's the message. This is perfect for us. So all of us are trying to do it at one time. So that governor is being set, is being recognized. But you'll see eventually, for those that run into the same message, you'll see that you'll be able to start getting messages. Okay, I'll give it a second here. So again, that governor is being ran. I also want you to be aware over to the right, you'll notice your messages don't have 404s highlighted. If you go over to the right, there's the highlight option. If you click on that, type in 404 and rerun your actual query, you'll start seeing that your 404s are highlighted. Also, if I wanted to, I can use the YO card here. So just as I did in my actual lab log search, I can do in a live tail. I can run that with YO cards as well. Again, you're seeing that the governor is prohibiting me from running it. So you'll get the real idea of what's going on. Okay, questions? If you use the metadata tag, like yes, so I'm using the metadata tag source category. Again, there's a metadata tag collector. The other metadata tags are available there as well, Javier. That's correct. All right, awesome. Let's go back to our lab steps. All right, so good job. Let's give you a preview of some of the questions that might appear on the exam. So down at the bottom, we see a quiz down at the bottom. And you can answer these live or in the chat. First question here, keywords are case sensitive, true or false?
No.
No is a good answer too, but that's false. That's correct. Remember, I always say insensitive when you're searching, case insensitive. So remember that. Next, true or false? And is implicit, ors are explicit.
Implicit. True. Yeah.
Correct. True. I could run my query without the and it would be implied. So yes, you guys are correct. Awesome. You're doing awesome now. Okay. Last question here. True or false? Keywords and metadata can use wildcards for live tails. You just
True.
saw me do it. Yeah, absolutely. You can. Absolutely. Just follow the actual format. Make sure you're following the format, the syntax that we've been using, and you'll be able to use wildcards. Okay. Questions so far? All right.
Yeah. So basically on the point number 7 about the image right there, it says run a live tail search for Labs Apache access for messages containing 404s. Notice live tail sessions do not do support wildcard searches.
Yes.
Does that also support the like the one that we use on top, like check asterisk?
That's a wildcard. Yeah, you mean check asterisk? Yeah, that's a wildcard.
Okay, so it can be used with the source category or as a keyword. Okay.
Yeah. Again, that's something from an administrator's perspective. As your logs are being ingested into Sumo, you're trying to see those messages. So those queries works as well. Good answer. Good question. Okay. All right, very good, ladies and gentlemen. You got through that first part. That was just you know, kind of taking us slow, how to be, you should know some of the stuff we've been doing, wildcards. We did this in fundamentals. So we took it kind of slow, okay? Now in the bottom right corner of your lab number 1, we want to go to lab 2, simple parsing, grouping, and filtering. All right, so here we're going to just learn the basic operators to parse and group our results, okay? We'll do future labs that'll give us a deeper insight on this, okay? So lab 2, step number 1, we are going to search our Apache logs, our access and our error logs for the last 15 minutes. And we're going to count the results by source. So let's go ahead and highlight that expression, copy it, go back to the CIP. You can close some of those tabs, ladies and gentlemen, just by clicking on any one of those tabs and click close all tabs, just so you can have, you know, understanding of the environment. All right, let's go ahead and create a new log search. And let's paste in the expression. Again, I'll just comment it out. So here's a tip for you to comment out a line. You can use 2 backslashes, okay? And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to kind of just show you the results first. So again, we're querying both Apache and Era. We use the wildcard, so anything under Apache and Era is there, okay? Yeah, forward, okay? That's perfect, okay? So you'll see down here all of my messages. I have over 8,000 messages, 356. If I look at my source category by clicking on it, again, I'm looking at all of the source categories that these messages come from, okay? You'll notice my numbers are changing, ladies and gentlemen. I did this 10 minutes ago and it was like 90% or 80%. So again, that's because the data is changing, evolving. Now, I'm going to remove the actual slashes. Now, I'm using an operator. Whenever you use an aggregate operator, it's going to issue an aggregates tab. Notice I'm counting by source, okay? I have source as an actual, in my field browser, as an actual field. So I'm going to go ahead and run that for the last 15 minutes. I see my messages tab that has all of my messages. And while I'm here, let me go ahead and point out something in case you run into this on a test somewhere. If I wanted to export the messages, I would go over to the gear symbol and export them, okay? Again, we have a count by. Our operators are gonna be in a purplish shade, okay? That generated an aggregates tab, and I see the amount of messages across each one of those sources, okay? If I wanted to download these items, I would click on this first icon in my messages tab, excuse me, my aggregates tab. So if I wanted to export in my aggregates, I would use this icon, okay? And in case that ever comes up on a test somewhere. All right, now let's go back. Now, we want to update our query where we're using a parse regex, okay? We want to parse out the IP addresses, and then we're going to count them. So let's just highlight that middle query there, the middle part of the query. Let's highlight and copy that, okay? And I want to demonstrate to you how you're going to add that. Some of you may have tried to add it already and you hit the enter key. You may have learned that the enter key only runs the query again. In order to get a hard line there, I'm going to place my cursor up top, and on my Mac, I use Shift Return. If you're using another other than a Mac, you're going to use Alt Enter. Okay, now I have another line and I can paste. You don't have to add 2 lines like I did. I just did it so you can visually see. Okay. And I also think that is, yeah, it's all great. All right, now I'm going to comment out both of these. I'm going to show you a feature coming up. Again, last 15 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and run that. Like we saw before, here's my messages. It's querying across both sources. Now, some of you joined me yesterday or in the fundamentals course, and you learned about the parse anchor. The parse anchor is used when your messages are all formatted the same, okay? A parse regex is you would use if your messages aren't formatted the same. So for example here, if I look at my first message, this is a lab Apache. This is coming from Apache, okay? And it's looking for my IP address. Here it is, okay? Now, if I go and find my, my errors, that's gonna be, the actual IP address is gonna be in a different location, okay? And I don't wanna peel through all the way through these, but again, here's an error. I just went so fast. Sorry about that. Notice here, my labs Apache error, my IP is not the first thing anymore. Okay, here's the one here. My IP is actually like the fourth object. The timestamp is the first thing. So you would use a parse regex to look for the format no matter what source it is. Okay, so let's look at this expression. It says Odell, yours might not say Odell, but it says Odell, I want to use the parse regex operator. I'm going to create a new column called IP underscore address. And it's going to look for 1 to 3 digits, a period, 1 to 3 digits, a period, 1 to 3 digits, a period, 1 to 3 digits. And you know that's the format of an IP address. So it's going to go through both of those sources and filter out my IP address. Okay, so I'm going to run that. And of course, it goes and grabs from my error, it grabs that by the client. Okay, and if I go down to my Apache, it grabs that from the first one. So that's why you use the parse regex. Okay, if your messages are not formatted the same. Okay. All right, now let's go ahead and count these as well. Again, remember when you use the count operator, it's going to give you an actual aggregates tab. David, that's a good point. David says, hey, it's first match only. You're ahead of the game, but you're right. It's going to match on it's going to bring back the first IP address that it matches. We're going to demonstrate how you can get multiple IP addresses coming up, but that's a great question. Okay. All right, so I'm running this and I'm getting the count by, I get my aggregates, my messages, I see the total account across Apache and the total across arrows. Okay. Now we also want to, you said the lab shows count by IP address. Okay. All right, I could do that as well. I'm sorry, I probably overlooked that point. Thank you, Mark. I can change that real quickly. Again, we're counting by the IP address because that's the column. Good job. All right, and run that again. And now, there you go. You see the counts by IP addresses. Thank you. Good point there. All right, so again, you have your messages tab. It used the parse regex to filter out the IP addresses. And then we're going to count by that actual column that we created. Notice also in our field browser, that column is now one of our display fields. Awesome. Okay, let's go back to the lab. Now we're going to add one more step. We're going to filter out those with a counter greater than 500. And then we will display that in a pie chart. So this last line we're going to highlight where underscore count is greater than 500. Again, I'm placing my cursor at the end of the last line, the count, and I'm using a shift return. You would use an alt enter if you don't have a Mac, and you'll paste that. Now we could visually, go through and count this up manually, but again, we want to count it on our own. Now, if you take a look at the actual expression, it's using the underscore count. That's a placeholder because again, one of our operators is being used. So we can't use that as a count. So we use we use a placeholder, the underscore count. All right, and we run that. And here we can see the actual IP addresses that have greater than 500 messages. Okay. Over to the right here, you have different types of display options. So I can do a bar, I can do an actual line chart, but let's go ahead and do a pie chart. Okay, click on a pie chart. If you hover over any one of the items, you'll get your values displayed. Be aware you also have a legend over to the right as well. But Odell, I want to see the numbers. I want to get back to the numbers. Well, remember, again, this first icon, this is your table icon. It'll get you back to the values. Okay. All right. Back to our lab steps. We're on number 4. I don't see the legend. Make sure that your screen is wide enough. And when you click on the chart, it should be there. So maybe you have a scroll bar to scroll over to the right, Mark, but it should be over there to the right. All right. Next, in a new query, we're going to identify the top 10 source IP addresses by bandwidth usage. This will require parsing the byte size as well as the source IPs. So again, let's copy the entire query. Let's go ahead and create a new log search. And I'm going to paste in, and I'm going to also demonstrate to you how you can comment out multiple lines. So on my keyboard, again, I'm using a Mac. If you're using anything other than a Mac, you're going to use the Alt key. If I click the options, my actual mouse changes here, okay? Changes to a plus sign, and I can drag a line down, okay? Now, with dragging that line down, anything I type is going to apply to all rows, okay? So I want to comment out all my rows. Odell, I missed that. You went too fast. Okay. Again, on my Mac, I'm using the options. My mouse changes. If you're not on a Mac, you're going to use the Alt key. You're going to drag a line down. It's going to be a blinking cursor for all rows. And then I'm just adding the comment slashes. Okay. So again, here we're looking at our source category, our labs Apache Access. So I'm just going to run that first to kind of get you to understand what's going on. All right. Again, our access, our IP addresses are in the first position, so that's pretty straightforward. It's going to utilize the IP as a new field, look for 1 to 3 digits 4 times, it finds it, okay? So I'll go ahead and run that part. All right, so you can scroll through and see that it filtered out the IP addresses for you, okay? You'll also see that that newly created field is now in our field browser as one of the checked display fields. Okay. Now we want to issue a parse. Now notice we're using a parse here, and we're saying parse, look for the 200. The next field after that is going to be considered size. So if we look here and I find a 200, there it is. Here's one of them. The next field after this is going to be deemed size. Okay, so I'll run that. So if I look at my messages, first I have a new display field in my browser. It's called size. That was created off of the parse statement. It looked at each message and it looked for 200 and it found the size. Look for 200, found the size. Okay. Next, we're going to sum that field called size. Just an example, Mark. You could use any number. The 200, that's part of the parse statement. So let me just digress for one quick second. I don't want to get us too lost here. So if I just go right here and do a parse statement, you learn this actually in the fundamentals a little bit. Right click and I parse that. So again, oops, I wanted to do something else. I wanted to do this here. So if I highlight this entire statement here, right click and parse selected, I can replace this and click here and call it size. So that's sort of what it's doing, okay? Submit that. So you can see that same message is similar to what we created, okay? This here message that it inserted, okay? So that's all it is. It's the parse is used for specific location. So that's why you use that, okay? Yep, no worries. Good question. All right, let me get my statement back. Yeah, all right, let's get rid of that. Okay, so, all right, so we did the parse regex. We talked about the parse size. It brought it out. There's my values. Next, we are going to sum the size. Now, here's another one of those aggregates. So you know immediately in your mind that when I see an aggregate, it's going to create that aggregates tab. So we're going to sum our size as total bytes, and we're summing our sizes by IP address, which is what we filtered out in the parse regex. So again, we can see we have the aggregates tab, we have our initial messages tab, that's still there. We have our aggregates tab now, and we can see our total bytes. We summed the size and got the total bytes by IP address. Okay. Now we want to use the top operator. The top operator by default is going to sort it in descending order. Okay. So I'm saying I want the top 10 IP addresses by total bytes. Okay. And when we run that, we'll see the aggregates tab and it's in a descending order. If we wanted this to be an ascending, we could either A, click the column header, or B, we could physically type in ASC and run it and would be in ascending order. Okay. All right. Let's go back to our lab steps. All right, so that was lab number 2. Any questions there? Hopefully you're getting the feel of things and it's not too overbearing as of yet. Okay. In the bottom right corner, let's go ahead to lab number 3, parsing options. Now this is a very neat feature, ladies and gentlemen, and I want us to take a little time on this one here, okay? Parsing your logs allow you to provide structure to your messages by identifying the fields that are meaningful to you, okay? Now, by default, dynamic parsing mode is enabled. I'll show you that shortly, okay? That's turned on automatically. Dynamic parsing allows automatic field extractions from your JSON log messages when you run a search. This allows you to view your fields from JSON logs without having to manually specify parsing logic. So in other words, I don't have to parse out my JSON log because those fields are already there automatically, okay? Dynamic parsing extract JSON fields when you run a query at search time, runtime. Okay, let's go ahead and highlight under number 1, the actual query. We're going to run our CloudTrail logs. So let's go ahead and copy that. And let's go back to our CIP and create a new log search. Now, Odell, what do you mean this automatic parsing is automatically on? It's set to true, it's on. If I go over to, in my search, go over to the gear symbol, auto parsing mode is set to true, it's on, okay? Now, let me turn off my count so you can just see the raw messages without the count, okay? I'm gonna run the source category. I wanna see my AWS CloudTrail items. Now, if you take a look here, here's my time and my message, okay, my message. And I can see here are some of the key values, the key and the values, all right? In my field browser, since that item is turned on automatically, I can now see all of those fields that have been parsed out for me. So for example, if I go to user identity, I would have to parse out these in order to see them. I don't have to do that with that object on. I can go to user identity, and those are those fields that are available, okay? Well, wait a minute, Odell, I don't see the big difference here. Okay, let me show you. I'm gonna turn this off, okay? And I'll run the same query. Okay, when I run that query, I still get my time and my messages. I still see the user identity and all of those fields, but in my field browser, I don't see those fields. So as a developer, I would have to go ahead and parse out to get these. But no, the power in our tool is that's automatically done for the JSON logs, okay? So this auto parsing will filter out for you automatically. All right, so I'll run that again. You see the fields over here, all have been parsed out for us, okay? Then again, if I look at my AWS region, I see I have US West. I'll probably have more than just West. So I want to go ahead and count by my AWS region, okay? I can see, well, how were you able to use AWS region? Because it was one of those fields that actually have parsed out automatically for us, okay? All right, and we'll run that. David, we'll get to that shortly. We're going to come up to the empty fields shortly. Good question. So now we see our messages and we see all of our AWS regions and those counts. So we can see we have quite a few coming from the West, quite a few messages coming from the West. Okay. All right. Now, next, we're going to talk about the no dropped. All right. The no drop option for the parse operator. So in case that ever comes up on the question somewhere, the no drop option for the parse operator allows users to include messages in your results that don't meet the parse pattern. Okay, so first we're going to run this Apache error logs for 15 minutes and look at our messages. Okay, so let's go ahead and just copy what's under number 2. Go back to the CIP and create a new log search and paste. And let's run that. Okay. So we can see, if we look at some of our messages, we'll see that a lot of them have the client and the IP, but some of them don't have the IP. Okay, they don't. They have something else. Okay, they have maybe an error. Maybe they're not displaying the IP because it's a private IP. We capture public IPs, so maybe it's a private IP that it's not displaying. All right, so let's go back and grab our next step. We're going to add the parse client as client IP as the next part of our query. So again, I want to add a new row here, shift return, alt enter, and paste. So what this is doing, ladies and gentlemen, if we look at this for a second, look at a message, you're saying, hey, parse, use the bracket as a parsing anchor. This is the parse anchor parse object. So it says parse client. The next field after that is going to be considered the client IP. Now, if I go down here and I look here, I see this particular message doesn't meet that criteria. There's no client asterisk here. So this one won't display. Okay, it won't be part of our results. So let's go ahead and run that and you'll get the chance to see what I mean. Okay, so we can see, hey, it looked for client, there's the IP, client, there's the IP, and so forth. You can see our results are much smaller than what we originally had. Let me quickly demonstrate that to you to let you know the results were much larger. So when you parse, you're filtering out. So we initially had over 1,000 results, over 76 pages. When I use that parse, it's going to filter out. So now I see over 909 items and one of 37 pages. Okay. Now, going back to our actual lab, we're going to use the no drop. Okay. We're going to add the no drop option. We're going to notice how non-matched messages are kept with an empty client IP. We're going to notice how the no drop combined with an additional parse statement can allow us to parse the logs of varying patterns and formats. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's copy both of those last two items. Let's copy both of them so we won't have to type the parse. Let's copy them, go back to the CIP, and let's replace, highlight that bottom expression and just paste over it. Okay, I'm going to first comment out that last line so you can see the results. Okay, so again, we're saying, hey, parse client, and the next field is going to be our client IP. So it's going to drop everything that doesn't meet this pattern. But no, we added the no drop. Okay, so we're going to get all of those messages and we'll see the ones that don't have an IP there. Okay, again, those could be the private, they'll have a message there. Child spawned but unable to open database link, symbolic, etc. There's different messages, but there's no IP. Okay, so next, what we're saying is, hey, let's go ahead and parse where we see the mod log there, and that next field is going to be considered the message. Okay. All right, so here's an example. So it's using a parse anchor. So it's saying, starting here, okay, using the quote, the next field, we're going to classify that as message. We're still using the no drop, okay? And we'll run that. Now, not only do we have a client IP, we also have now a messages in our display field. Not only do we see the time, the client IP, but where there isn't a client IP, we see the actual message. All right. We'll take a break shortly, ladies and gentlemen. Just give me a minute to get through this lab. Let's go back. Now, step number 5, we want to filter those parsed by one or the other statement by using the is empty, is blank, or is null. Okay. And again, I want to quickly demonstrate this to you. It's going to be helpful to you. If you were to type in the help, you don't have to do this, ladies and gentlemen. This is extra knowledge. If you type in the help Sumo Logic, and just go in your search, and I'm just going to use the is empty here and search for that. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Sorry about that. All right, so here's my is empty. Okay, you can see there's a difference between these objects. Okay, the is empty operator versus the is blank. And I'll just throw this in the chat. Again, you know how to get here. I'm just being extra helpful to you and giving you this information. All right, let's get back to our query. All right, so I'm highlighting the fourth item here in step number 5, copying that, going back to my CIP, adding another line, and pasting. So I'm using a where clause, and I want where my client IP is blank. And I'll run that. So we know where the client IP is blank. There should be a message there. Okay. Now let's go back. Next, we want to use the parse field option to allow us to do further parsing on an already extracted field. In this example, we want to identify the top 5 committers in our GitHub. The search committers in the last 30 days, and then parse out the email. So let's go ahead and copy that under number 6. Create a new log search. I'm gonna close some of my tabs. And I'll paste in that expression. I'll comment out the bottom one. I want to change my actual time to the last 30 days. Again, I'm searching my GitHub using a keyword committer. So I can go through these messages and see, hey, there's the committer. There's the committer. All of these highlighted these messages have committer in them. Okay. Again, we're going to end up getting the top 5. I don't think there's a limit to the number of pipes. Again, we could pipe along, but again, we want to build the expression downward. But you'll see that we'll have a large message at the end of this class that have multiple pipes, maybe 8 or 9 or 10. So, all right, now this parse statement is saying, hey, find the email, the actual email, colon. The next field of that is going to be called email. Okay, so if we look at our message here, for example, find the email, colon, the next object after that, the next field after that is going to be considered email. Okay, so let's run that. So here's email. Here's the next field after that, and it's classifying it as email. I'll notice over here in my field browser, I have that new field, and I have that as a column as well. Okay, let's continue on. Now we're going to use the parse field option to further parse the email address into user and domain. Then we'll count the user and identify the top 5 committers. All right, so I'm going to highlight these last 3 steps here and copy that over. Go back to my CIP, add a hard line there, and paste. Okay, and again, I want to comment out the count just so you can see, and I'll count out the actual, comment out the top. Okay, so again, it's saying, hey, Odell, you've parsed out the email, looking for it and found the email, and you're classifying that as email. Now we're going to use a parse and then equate the field equal to email. And what we do here is we're going to look for the actual @ symbol. The object before the @ symbol is going to be considered the user. The object after the @ symbol is going to be considered the domain. So again, we're using the field command operator to actually equate that to a field that we actually filtered out. And let's run that. So we now, in our field browser, we have time and message, but we also have domain, email, and user. Over in our actual results, it's still processing, but again, we'll see in that first message, it has the domain, the actual email, and the user. So again, it actually did a parse using that email field. Okay. All right. Next, we want to count by the user. So again, you know, you're going to get an aggregates tab. That user field is one of the fields that we actually parsed out. Run that. And here we can see our original messages, and we can see those users and counting up those actual messages that they have. Okay. And then finally, we'll use the top operator. We want the top 5 users by count. Now we could eyeball this, but again, we want to actually code this so we can get the top 5 users by count. Again, remember, we're using the count underscore count as a placeholder because the count is an operator. All right, and we'll go ahead and run that. And we can see the actual top 5 users by count once it finishes. By default, the top is going to sort it in descending order. Again, if you want it to be sorted in ascending order, you could type in the ASC. Okay. All right. Next, this was a question asked by someone here. We want to use the parse multi. Okay. This option allows you to extract multiple occurrences of the same pattern within one message. By default, parse only extracts the first occurrence. First, we're going to search our snort data and then extract the IP addresses. So let's go ahead and copy this entire number 8, copy that, and go back to our CIP, and let's create a new log search and paste. I'm going to comment out the parse just to kind of give you the results here so you can see it. I'll run this. All right, now, if I look at my message here and my snort logs, I can see here's an IP address and here's an IP address. And you guys just learned that when we use the parse, it's going to just match on the first occurrence. So again, I'll uncomment this. I'm using the parse regex. I'm going to create a new column called IP address, and it's going to look for that format. I run that. Again, I have a display field called IP address. I see the time, and it filtered out that first occurrence. I go to the next step. This is a different message, so it filters out the next occurrence. Okay. If I add the multi, which you can also add just by typing that and hitting run, you're going to see now, here's my actual timestamp. Here's the first IP address. If I go to the next message, here's the same message, but the second IP address. And so forth and so on if it would have been more. Okay. All right, let's go back. Now, field extraction rules. That was something that I talked about at the very beginning. FERs, okay? Field extraction rules extract fields at the time the log messages are ingested. You can see all your field extractions available under our manage data logs, okay? Now, I just want you all to just copy this expression here, copy this expression under number 10, and let's create a new log search, okay? And I'm going to demonstrate to you the field extraction rules. It's similar to the JSON, okay? It's similar. So I'm going to expand the stack of cheese, stack of hamburgers, my Sumo Logic, my navigation panel, okay? I'm gonna go down to my main menu, manage data. Under my main menu, there's several links. I wanna go to my logs. Once I come to my logs, I have a field extraction rule tab. I'll click on that, okay? And I wanna go down and look for a particular one here that I have, my FER demo. I'm going to click on that to open it, okay? Notice when this extraction rule will be applied at ingestion time. Notice what it's going to be applied to. My source, my underscore source category equals lab Apache access. Notice what it's parsing out. It's using a regex and it's parsing out my source IP, my method, my URL, my status code, my size, my fur, and my user age. Odell, why would I do something like this? To improve performance. If this is done at ingestion time, when your users go and look at the logs, they don't have to filter out and parse out these fields. They're already there for us, okay? So I digress. I'm going to close the actual logs and go back to the actual query here. All right. And again, I'm going to comment out the actual count and just run this. So you see that I'm actually going to go against my Apache access. I'm looking for the status code of 404. Well, how is it using status code? We don't even know about status code. Well, if I look at my field browser, I can see that status code was one of the extracted fields during ingestion time, okay? So that's how I was able to use that. Notice I'm also counting by a field that doesn't exist in my display. In my display, it doesn't exist, but it's part of the hidden fields. So I can see that my source IP is there, so I can utilize that in my actual query. Okay, so I have an aggregates tab. Here's my source IP that it's counting by. Okay, again, my messages tab is using my source IP as well. All of my messages have 404 in them. Okay. All right. All right. Let's go over the quiz and then we'll take a break here. Okay. True or false? CSV, JSON, split, key values are all parsing operators. Well, let's say you don't know the answer to that, because maybe I haven't talked about all of the parsing operators. You know what I'm going to do, ladies and gentlemen? I'm going to go back to my help, Sumo Logic, and I'm just going to go here and mark, nope, you're not right there. I'm going to go back to my parse operators, hit enter, because I hadn't told you this, so you may not be aware. I'll go parse operators and look here. I have JSON, key values, CSV, etc. So again, when I don't know something, what I do is I go to the help, because I don't know everything about the tool, but there's so much information there. Okay, so I actually pasted that in there in case you ever need that for a test or anything. All right, next question there. Once a field has been parsed, it cannot be parsed any further. True or false? Oh, come on. Come on. Come on. Didn't we just do this here? Didn't we parse out email and then we parse the field email even further? Were you guys with me on that one? So again, you can further parse it. Yeah, that's true. All right, now, number 3, fields parsed by the FER, the field extraction rules, are available in the field browser. Very good, Herman. Yes, that's true. Okay. All right. So again, let's go ahead and take a quick 5-minute break. Let's breathe, exhale, get out of the room, get away from the computer, and let's come back in 5 minutes. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you got an opportunity to breathe, get away, exhale. We had just completed our lab number 3. Let's continue on. Let's go to our conditional operators with lab number 4. All right, now with our conditional operators, we're going to teach you how to use conditional logic, the if-then, okay? Conditional operators allow us to use that if-then operator. What we're going to do is write a query that scans through our lab Apache access logs for the last 60 minutes and returns the number of successful requests returned with a status code of 200 versus the number of error requests with this status code of 404s. Okay, so under lab 4, number 1, let's go ahead and highlight the entire expression there. And let's go ahead and copy that. Go back to our CIP. You can close any of the actual tabs that you have open. And let's go ahead and create a new log search. I want to paste this in here. And again, I'm going to comment out. So I'll use my options key, your Alt or Option key, depending on the environment you're in. And I want to comment those out. Okay. So again, I'll run this. Oops, I want to change the time period. We want to use that for the last 60 minutes. So I'll change my time period to 60 minutes and run that. So here I am actually seeing all of my messages. Let me hide my, yeah, there you go. Okay. Seeing all of my messages here. What I want to do is go through these messages and I want to parse out my status code. Okay, so it's using the parse command. It's saying, hey, look, find the HTTP/1.1. The next field after that is going to be considered the status code. So for example, here it is. Here's my status code, and so forth and so on. So it's going to parse that out and create that new field called the status code. So I'll run that. I have that new field called status code. So no matter what the number is, it's retrieving the value. Okay. Now I want to use an if condition. Okay. Now, if that status code is equal to 200, I want it to be true or 1, else 0 or false. I want to deem that column as successes. So it's going to evaluate my 200, if my status codes to see if they're 200s or not. Okay, and I'll run that. Again, remember you'll have that newly created field in your field browser. So my successes is now displaying. I see the time, there's a 500. In my successes column, there's a 0. So it was false. It doesn't meet my condition. Here's a 200. It's true. It meets my condition. Okay. Then our next step in our query says, hey, Odell, if the status code is equal to 400, I want that same type of scenario. I want a true or false scenario, but I want a new column called client errors. Okay. So again, it runs through and it says, okay, looks at the actual status code. Again, I'll see in my client errors a 0 because it doesn't meet my condition. But the next item in my results, it's a true. But notice my successes is a false because it doesn't meet that condition of 200s. Okay. Lastly, we're going to go ahead and say, hey, let's sum all of our status codes that are 200s, and we're going to call that success count. We're then going to sum all of our 404s that are true and call that client errors. Excuse me, client error count. All right. So we're summing both of those fields and running it. And we see we have a ratio here, our success counts to our failures. Okay. Awesome. And then you can always come back here and try this test your knowledge query when you're playing around. Okay, so here's another example, but we're going to continue on and go to our using of subqueries to filter. So those of you that are familiar with SQL, we have that subquery type event where we want that inner query to actually be utilized for our outer query. Okay, so in this lab, we'll be using a subquery operator to dynamically change a keyword with the results of a different query. Okay, so let's say we wanted to run the subcategory lab Apache access and the keyword being 127.0.0.1. Okay, to identify all of the Apache messages, the access to for a given IP address. Okay, however, we'd like to automatically change the IP address to one of the most file doesn't exist errors in our error logs. So we can find the IP address by running the second query, our child query. This will then, we can use to compare our IP address in the most errors that are given. So basically, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to run this child query and use it to populate our parent for the keyword. So instead of us using a keyword, we're going to use that child query. Okay. So let's go ahead and grab that first query there. And let's go ahead and copy that. And we'll come back and grab the other ones. Just want you to see what's going on here. Create a new log search and paste. Okay. So normally, if we wanted an IP address, we would add that in our query. We would add that right there as a keyword. Okay. We would add the IP address. All right. Now let's go back to our actual lab steps. Okay. Now let's go down to step number 2 here. Next, we're going to create a second query to return one IP address that's associated with the file doesn't exist. Okay. So we're going to use a parse statement and count and a top rank. So let's go ahead and highlight that and copy it. And let's go back to our CIP and let's create a new search, new log search, and paste it. And if we just kind of break this down for a second before we actually run it, just to get an understanding here. Again, we're going to, this is our child query. We want to search our actual labs Apache area, and we're using a keyword here, okay? Now, we want to be able to parse out, and we're going to search for in our results. So let me just show you the results first. All right, now, see what it's doing here. It's actually going and parsing. It's saying, look for client. The next field will be our IP. And again, we've actually searched for our actual errors for the file doesn't exist. So here are all the files doesn't exist. We're now parsing and looking for that particular IP address. Okay. We found that IP address. We've actually also parsed out the time and the error. So we found the time and the actual error message and the IP. That's what that parsing did for us. Now we want to aggregate the results. So we're going to use a count by. We're counting by the IP. Now you'll notice if you look at these real quickly, ladies and gentlemen, all of these IPs are the same. Okay, so we're just going to count them up. Again, we're using a very simple idea here with just one IP address. Okay, this here next statement is, what if we had more than one IP address? We could use the top K. The top K will rank our actual values, but we only have one. Okay, we only have one IP. But again, imagine if you had multiple IPs that you were searching for, you could rank them. Okay, and we're ranking them by our actual count, and there's only one. Okay, and then lastly, we go back and we'll get number 4. And number 4 actually is the guts and meats of bringing everything together. So let's go ahead and copy that. Go back to our CIP. Again, it's going to bring the entire query together. I'm going to just create a new log search and paste. So remember, we were going against looking for our Apache Access. We could put a keyword here, but we don't. We want this subquery. So we're using the subquery operator and saying, hey, here's that source category. Files doesn't exist. Remember, that's the query number 2. It's still doing the parse. It's parsing out the time and the error and the IP. It's still doing the count of the IP. And then it's doing the top K to rank it. But also notice, and I'll put this on another line. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I'm gonna put this on another line. Notice also we're using the compose operator. We're telling it, hey, compose the IP as the keywords. So again, we're using 2 operators, the compose and the keywords. We're bringing the entire query, the first one and the second one together. Now we run this. So it's using that IP from the child query to actually populate the source category keyword. Okay, and I can see here all of these messages have that particular IP. So it's that subquery type field that we just did. Okay. All right. Let's continue on. Again, in your lab steps, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to find out further information about subqueries, again, you can click on that link and it'll give you more documentation on subqueries. Let's go ahead and plot our clients on a map. Okay. What I want to first share with you is the geo lookup. Okay. We have a relationship with NewStar. Okay. NewStar will provide us information if we give them the IP. So Sumo Logic can match a parsed IP address to a geographical location on a map. Okay, to create the map, we're going to use the IP address. Okay, when we provide the IP address, the latitude, the longitude, and the count, and other fields can be rendered. Okay, the key thing here, ladies and gentlemen, is we have to provide the IP address. And what happens is NewStar will provide that to a lookup table. NewStar will give us the longitude and the latitude. Okay, I'll post that in there for you as a reference. Then I'll go back to my lab steps. Let's go ahead under lab number 6, number 2. We're going to run against our Apache logs. We're going to parse out, and I'll copy this over and create a new log search here. And let's talk about what we're doing here. So I want to go ahead and comment out everything so we can get an idea. So again, you guys know we're going against our lab Apache access. Okay. And the next statement is going to look for, it's a parse anchor. Okay. So all of our messages are the same. Let's say it's going to look for that IP address for us. Okay. There it is. Okay. And it says, look for that and classify this as client IP. So I now have a new column called client IP. It parsed out the actual IP address. Okay. Now, when you use a lookup, it's best to read it from right to left. Okay. So what we're saying here is the IP, the client IP, which we parsed out, we're going to look it up in the geolocation table that Newstar provides and populates for us. And it's going to give us the longitude and the latitude. Okay. So it's saying look up the longitude and latitude for that IP address. So when we run that, we get, providing that IP address, the latitude and longitude. Okay. Next, now, if I notice for a second here, if I go ahead and run this, I want to count by. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and count by my latitude and longitude. So when I run that, notice I get an aggregates tab. That's very important to understand. So when you do this geo lookup, you need the latitude, longitude, and the count. Why do I need that, Odell? Well, you need that in order to be able to click on the actual map. We're not there yet, but again, I need to point that out to you. You need those fields in order to make this object available. Lastly, we're just going to sort our count. Okay, that's not necessarily mandatory, but again, the fields that are the latitude, longitude, and the count. Okay, now in your actual display object, you can click on the map. And now you have the ability to zoom in, click, double click in, drag and move over. You have a map display. So you can see where your messages are. You can drill all the way down to the street level. Okay. All right. Awesome. All right, let's continue on, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go to calculating changes and moving averages. Okay, let me go ahead and open up the operator for diff for you. It calculates change. So again, the diff operator calculates the rate of change in a field between consecutive rows to produce the results. The diff requires that the specified field contains numeric values. Okay. All right, so let's go back and let's get into our lab here. We're going to calculate the difference in the number of requests over the last 15 minutes. So let's go ahead and highlight that entire expression on number 1. Go back to the CIP and create a new log search. Let's go ahead and paste that. And again, I want to comment out to walk you through the query. So the first thing here is we're going against our lab Apache access. Again, you're familiar with that. No big deal there. We've been doing that all the time. Okay. Next, we want to use the time slice operator. We want to render our results in 1 minute time slices. Okay. Then we'll count those 1 minute time slices. So we're doing a count by, and notice since our time slice is an operator, we're using the placeholder feature. Again, we could easily click on the time to put things in order, but let's use the actual sort by command. And the sort by default is actually in descending order. We want to change that to ascending order. Okay. And we hard coded that. So by default would be descending, but again, we're going to use ascending. So I see in the first time period, 1 minute time slice, 233 messages. The second time slice, 479, etc. Okay. Now I want to use the diff on the count. Notice I'm using the diff command operator, and I'm using the underscore count as the placeholder of whatever was in count, okay? And I'll run that. So if I look at the math here, I see in the first minute I had 460, okay? This number minus that number gives me a difference. This number, 516 minus 588, gives me a difference. 588 minus 5, it gives me a difference, okay? Now, okay, we can actually plot this out and see if we looked at our minute time slices, we can see over time our actual count of our messages and the actual difference. All right. Back to our actual steps here. We're now going to use the smooth operator. Okay. Again, let me launch this in a new tab. Looking at that smooth operator, again, the smooth operator calculates the rolling or moving average of a field, measuring the average of a value smooth to smooth random variations. So the smooth operator reveals the trends in your data sets that you include in your query. Okay, let's go back, close this out, and go back to my lab steps. And let's highlight and copy the entire object under number 2. Okay, and let's create a new log search. And let's paste that in. Again, we're going to look at our labs Apache access, and we're going to look at it in 1-minute increments. So I want my results to be in 1-minute increments. Okay. You could use other time slices, an hour or whatever, you could. We want to now count up those time slices. Okay, so that's going to give us an aggregates tab. Okay, we want to sort this in ascending order by our time slices, because if you look here, these numbers are not in consecutive order. So that's why we're sorting them. Okay, and I'll run that. It's going to put it in ascending order, 739, 224, 740, and so forth. So we sorted them. Okay. Hold on. This should be smooth. Let me change that real quickly. All right, there you go. And then lastly, we want to make sure I did that correctly. I don't think I did that correctly. Let me grab it all. I apologize. Let me copy this correctly and paste it. All right, so let's go back over here. All right, so again, first of all, I'm looking at my labs Apache access, and I'm using my status codes of 404s. Okay. I'm going to render my results in 1-minute time slices. Going a little bit too fast here. All right, there you go. All right, so here we go. We're gonna render these in 1-minute time slices. So I should see in my messages all 404s, which I do. Go through, I can visually see my 404s here in 1-minute time slices, okay? We're going to count as error count. So we're creating a new field called error count, and we're gonna count by our time slices. So you'll see in my field browser, in my field browser, I have, in my aggregates, I have a count. I'm counting up my actual error counts by time slices. Then I mentioned before, they're not in any type of order. So we're using the sort to put them in order. Remember, the sort by default is in descending order. We're using the ASC to put them in ascending order. Okay. Now we're going to use the smooth operator. And we're going to smooth our error count as a rolling average. Okay. So if we look at the math here, again, we have an aggregates tab. If we look at this, 15 times 1 is 15. We add up the 2, excuse me, divided by 1, we get those. We add up the 2, 15 plus 18, you get your 35 there, or 32 there. And then we want to go ahead and divide that by 2. Add up the 3, divided by 3. Add up the 4, divided by 3. So that's the math. But it'd probably be easier to kind of view this on an actual diagram, okay? So let's go ahead and put it on an actual line chart. Now this is still sort of overwhelming here. I have 2 values that I plot and they're line. What do you think we could do to actually change this to make it a little bit more legible? I haven't taught you this yet, but you probably could go to the gear symbol and you can change your series. And maybe we want to change our error count from being a line to maybe a column. So this is the method you would use if you had to plot multiple numbers. So you would go to that gear symbol, go to your change series, and change the actual error count. So I can now see my rolling averages over my error counts and my minute time slices. Okay. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead on to find the needle in the haystack. We're going to go against our snort logs. We're going to use the log reduce. Okay, so this is going to allow us to find those unique messages. Okay, it's going to give us a signatures tab as well. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this top expression, go back over, create a new log search. And now paste that. And run it. And let me increase the time a little bit. I'll increase to 60 minutes there. So if I look at these messages, ladies and gentlemen, let's say I look at the first message. I see it says classification, web application attack. Classification, attempted information leak. So I have over 6,000 results, over 246 pages. I want to be able to utilize the log reduce so it will find those like patterns. Okay, so you can either use the log reduce or you can actually paste in the actual lab step. But again, it's going to do the same thing here. The only thing it doesn't do is put it on a separate line here. So what it's doing now is going through and it's looking for all of the actual occurrences of that phrase. Okay, so I see there's over 3,000 occurrences of the classification attempt information leak. There's over 1,000 of these web attacks. Now these asterisks are the different TCP IP addresses. Okay, so that's why it's commented out with asterisks, because it's different values. But again, I can see that in here I have these messages multiple times. Now, let's take a look here at the relevancy here. And we're going to utilize these these up and down. Let's say I looked at this message and I know this message is not really that important. I could change the actual relevancy. So I demoted that to 0. So these are just common messages. I don't think it's anything we should actually go through and have to investigate. So you have the ability to demote an object. Notice it changes the relevancy to 0. Okay. And let's say, for example, there was something, an attack response. Right now, the relevancy is 5. I may want to promote that to be a 10 because we need to find out what's going on. Okay. So again, you have the capability of promoting and demoting these messages with the thumbs up or thumbs down. The actual pencil will allow you to edit the message. You cannot delete. If that ever comes up on a test somewhere, you can edit the message, but you can't delete it. Okay. Other things you can do here. if I were to, let's say, for example, drill on and I want to see all 434 messages, it allows me to actually focus on those messages. Notice my query changed. I'm looking at all 434 of those messages now, okay? I also have the ability to actually look at the message and find out, maybe I want to see the host and find out any surrounding messages, maybe 1 minute before, 5 minutes before, 5 minutes or 10 minutes after. So I can look at the surrounding messages for my host. Okay, I can also do that for my actual name. The name matches the message from the same path and file. So I have the ability to look at the surrounding messages. And then the category, I have that same capability. The category matches the messages on the same user. So I can look at the surrounding messages, maybe a minute before or a minute after, okay? All right. I'm gonna use this same set of log, the same snort log. So you can do the same thing that I'm doing if you followed along. I wanna run the snort log again with nothing in it. Run it again, okay? Now, next we want to use a log compare. And what the log compare allows you to easily compare your log data from different time periods to maybe detect any major changes or anomalies, okay? So when I click on this log compare, it automatically defaults to the time shift of the last 24 hours. And I'm gonna put this on another line so it kind of is easier to actually absorb. Okay, so again, I can manually change this value to a different period. So it's saying, hey, look at the last 24 hours. Okay. Now in your log compare, you also have the ability to change it as well. You can use the custom or 7 days. These are defaults here, but you can manually change it as well. Okay. Now, if we look through here, we can see here that the top item says, hey, and the bottom item was the prior time. So I have 43% more messages than I did yesterday. Okay, today I have -3% than I did yesterday. Okay, and if I scroll through here, I'll get down to where I get to start seeing some names. So here I'm on page 3 of my results. I see that this is new. That means it wasn't there before. Okay, so I see this new displaying it wasn't there before. Okay, I also see gone. That means it's no longer there, no longer exists. Now, you might want to find out all of your new occurrences in that time period. Maybe you need to upgrade or something. Maybe it's a new upgrade and you need to find out wherever that new occurs. So I'm gonna go back to my lab steps and I'm gonna go ahead and click on my lab number 9, okay? We actually went through step 1 already, okay? I'm gonna now add my step 3 here where it says the absolute. We want to view only those results where the delta percentage is more than 25%. We're going to add a where clause for the delta percentage. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this bottom statement. Okay, I'm going back to my messages here and I'm going to add a new line and I'm going to paste it. So we're saying, hey, where the delta percentage is greater than 25. Okay, and if before I run that, if I look here, I can visually see there's a percentage that's greater than 25, and I can visually see that. But again, I want the tool to do the work. I'm using the absolute operator. So what that's going to give me is whether it's -25 or +25. All right, so here I see a -39. Again, this is an absolute, so it's going to give me a negative or positive here. Okay. I still see my new and gone as well. All right, going back over. Lastly, we want to view the results where there's a new signature in the current time period and where the clause is for is new. Okay, so we're just going to replace that where statement that we had for absolute with the is new. So I'm just going to highlight where it says absolute is greater than 25 and paste. So where is new? And remember, I saw a bunch of new, and that would be an instance where, hey, I need to get all of my new messages that weren't there before. I need that. So in case I need to, it's an impact where I need to implement something. Okay. So here I'm only displaying where it's a new value by using the is new in my where clause. All right. Couple more labs, ladies and gentlemen. Let's keep going. You're doing wonderful. Good job. Okay. Next, we want to look at our outliers. Okay. So I'm going to open up a new tab, kind of give you a high level of the outlier. Okay. Given a series of timestamps of numerical values, using the outlier operator in a query can identify values in a sequence that seems unexpected. We want to identify that anomaly. Okay. All right. Now we're going to see there's 4 fields there. There's the window, which sets the trailing number of data points to calculate the mean and the sigma. The default is 10. We're going to see the threshold, where it sets the number of standard deviations to calculate the violations. So that kind of controls our cloud. We're going to see the consecutive. We're going to set this number as required to see the consecutive indicator. So this is going to trigger the actual violation. You'll see it shortly. And then we'll have a direction. The positive shows above the actual threshold and the negative shows below the threshold. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into our query here. And let's highlight this. We want to run this query here for 60 minutes. We're going to identify outside of our outliers outside of 3 standard deviations. So let's go ahead and copy, create a new log search and paste. So let's first look at what we're doing. We're looking at our source category lab Apache Access, where our status codes are 404s. We want to render our results in 1-minute time slices. Okay, and we're running this query for the last 60 minutes. All right, so here's our results in 1-minute increments. Now we're going to count our status codes. We're going to create a new column called error count. We're counting by our time slice for the last 60 minutes. Okay, so we're seeing our errors here in our new error count field. Now we're going to utilize the outlier using the error count, where we have those 4 fields that I just talked about. Okay, and let's run that. All right, let's change I'm going to change my consecutive to 2. And I'm going to explain what's going on here. Okay. And let's bump this threshold down a bit. I'm going to bump my threshold down to 1. That'll give me more points here. All right, so it's perfect. All right, let's take a look at mine. Okay, yours may not be exactly like mine, but let's explain the math. So we initially started out with our error counts. Here's our upper boundary and our lower boundary. Right now, this is an error indicator because it's not in our boundary. Now, I set the consecutive to 2. So let's look at the next message. I had 12 error counts. It's not in the range of my upper and lower. So again, the error count indicator is 1. But now that triggered a violation because I set my consecutive to 2. Notice it didn't happen on the first occurrence. It happened on the second occurrence. Okay. Now let's look at this from a line perspective. Okay. So here is my first occurrence and second occurrence. Okay. I can see the actual threshold, which actually governs the actual upper and lower boundaries. If I wanted to change and see only all of the objects above the threshold, I could change the direction to plus and run that. So now I would only see the items above the threshold. Okay, and here's one of those items. Again, I ran it, different data comes in. And if I wanted to see the ones below, of course, I can use the minus and run that. Okay, so this direction actually allows me to see the ones below because I use minus there. Okay. Again, you will refer to the actual outlier command that we actually looked up. The window, the consecutive, the threshold, and the direction. Again, the window is going to calculate the mean plus the standard deviation. The threshold is going to set the number of standard deviation. So the lower the number, the more you'll see. The higher the number, the less you'll see of your indicators. The consecutive will display the actual graph. It'll set the required number of the consecutive indicators. So it's going to trigger that violation. Okay. All right, let's go back to our lab step and let's go to our number 11. We got one more after 11, so hang in there with me. We have two types of predict operators, okay? So we're going to use the linear approach. So there's a linear approach, and then there's the actual autoregressive approach, okay? I'll leave that there for your readings. We, of course, are going to use the linear approach. Going back to my lab, I'm going to use the predict operator to understand future trends based on our existing data. Okay, so I'll go ahead and highlight this and copy, go back over to my search and add a new log search and paste. Again, I'm looking at my lab's Apache access for my status codes that are equal to 404. I'm going to render this in 1 minute time slices. I'm going to count my status codes as error codes by that time slice. And I'm going to predict my error count in 1 minute increments. So I'll run that. So here are my items. Notice that the predict sorts automatically, okay? It'll be better viewed in a line chart. And we can see that the prediction is that we won't have any errors going forward. So you can see the line is trending down, okay? I could also look at my messages and see that eventually the numbers, if I go back to my aggregates, pardon me, if I go to my aggregates and look at the values, I can see that I start seeing error counts as blank. Okay, again, it's predicting. So I wanted to display that in a line chart and show you that, again, it's trending down. All right. Lastly, we want to use the transaction operator, which allows us to analyze related sequences of messages based on a unique identifier, such as an IP address or a session ID, okay? This lab uses a transaction to track the states a user hits with an e-commerce website called Ecomart. This will allow you to conduct analysis on how users are interacting with your e-commerce website, okay? So we're going to run this particular query. And we're going to run this for the last 24 hours. So this is an example using the transaction operator to capture some possible states using IP addresses as the unique identifier. Okay, again, for the last 24 hours, we'll paste that and change our time period to the last 24 hours. Okay. Again, we see several from and to states here, but what this allows us to do using that transaction on the IP, it allows us to see and display our actual results in an actual graph here, okay? I can see my ship orders. I can see what's in the cart. I can see my shipping info and then the confirmation. The scenario I like to give with this is if my wife and I went to the grocery store, I put in a bunch of cheese, I turn around, go get some hamburgers, she takes it out. I put in the hamburgers, she takes it out. That's the type of scenario that I'm saying. What's in the cart, what's being shipped, okay? So this type gives you that type of information. All right. Lastly, we'll create a meaningful alert. Okay, this is the last lab, seriously, okay? Now, we have a blog post. It's important to actually understand when is a good time to send me an alert. So this blog post is awesome for you, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and paste that in the chat for you. But basically, it tells you about meaningful alerts, okay? What makes an alert meaningful? Alerts should be actionable. Alerts should be directed, okay? All right, so we're gonna go ahead and actually utilize the last query here. We're gonna search for only messages that have a status code of 200 or 404s. We're gonna count our 200s as successes and our 404s as failures. We're gonna sum both our successes and failures. Then we're gonna create a ratio of failed success and then create an outlier, okay? So I'll copy this. Again, we'll go ahead and run this query in a new log search. And I'll paste it here. Again, as I mentioned, we're using that if operator. So if status code equals 200, true. If status code equals 400, true, else false. So that 0 is false. We're going to put that in a successes and a fails column. We're then going to sum our successes as success count. We're going to sum our failures as fail count. And we're summing those by time slice. We put this in 1 minute time slices, okay? Then we're going to go ahead and create that failure rate percentage by dividing our fail count by the sum of our success count and fail count and multiplying that by 100. Then finally, we will identify our outlier. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that. And I'll change my threshold here to 2. Okay. And run this. I want to see some values here. Okay. All right. And again, we're looking at our failure rate percentage. Okay. The violation here. All right. Again, I can actually display this in a line chart if need be, but let's go ahead and finish this up. Adding this line, this where clause, we're going to filter out any outliers. So when the ratio increases is higher than normal, we can then create a scheduled alert. So again, let's go ahead and copy this statement over and add it to the last line. and let's paste it. So initially I was talking about that failure rate violation. If I scroll over here, okay, where it's greater than 0, I want to create alert. So when I run this, okay, and I'll make sure I give it some more time here. Let me put it at about 60 minutes here. I want to get some more values there. All right, so here I get more values there. All right, so again, I want to get alerted on this. Now, you guys might remember this, or you might not. How do I create an alert, Odell? Well, great question. I go to either the save as icon or the actual 3 dots. Click on save as. I can give it an actual name if I wanted to. I'll schedule this search. You know, when you click schedule, it's defaulted to never. This is also how you would turn it off. But anyhow, I want to change that to every 15 minutes. Okay. I want to go ahead and I want to specify the alert type. Maybe it's an email, or maybe we're going to use a webhook to go to Slack, or maybe it's some type of script action. So we have the ability to use other alerting. We can use webhooks to get to those other alert systems. Okay, so again, I could choose email, put in a recipient, and then save it. Okay, now to turn this off, ladies and gentlemen, I need to also point this out. I can go back to either the query, or I can go back to my personal folder, look for the search, click on the edit, click on the 3 dots for more, click on the edit this schedule, and change the run frequency to never. Please do that for us. Again, thank you. All right, you guys are awesome. All right, so let's get back to our slides and wrap things up here. I went over a bit. I apologize. You'll still have an hour for your actual lab, your exam, pardon me. You'll still have an hour. So let's go down here and let's get here. All right, any questions before we actually stop the actual recording? All right. So you now have the ability to create, to actually take the exam. There's 30 questions, 60 minutes. I'll be here for the entire 60 minutes to help you. You need 75% to pass. Again, use your resources, the slides, the labs, the documentation, the help, okay? One thing I have to remind everyone of, okay? Right now, you are in our training environment. We don't want your certificate once you pass to read training analyst, whatever number. So go ahead and log out or sign out by clicking. Again, you make sure you're in your navigation panel. You're down in your main menu. You're clicking on the name and you'll see sign out. Okay. Now you're going to log in to your company's environment, just like I'm doing. Again, you're going to go to your certification link under your home tab. Click on your certification link, get certified. Okay. Once you click on that get certified, you're going to click on the box that reads get certified. Okay. We just completed the search mastery. So you're going to click on the search mastery exam. Okay. And then you'll go ahead and take the actual exam. Now, I want to remind you before we actually cut off everything, remember, you click on that person icon in the top right corner. Once you log into your company's environment, you can go to your My Profile and you can go ahead and post your certification to LinkedIn. Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop speaking on behalf of Sumo Logic trainers, on behalf of Josh and myself. We thank you for joining us. Good luck on the exam, and we look forward to seeing you in upcoming trainings.